can start sharing the intro slide, introducing ourselves. I'm your backup Thompson today. My name is Lance Thompson. Yes, I am related to Kamala. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it today. I do have about years of experience in revenue operations and sales before that. Kind of heavy into the technical setup side of things. Being a former and current Salesforce administrator and setting up a lot of the business and technical systems. Joining us also today are Doug Bell and Nadia Davis. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Nadia, should I go first?
Sure.
I am a fractional CMO. I'm actually wrapping up my last 2 weeks with Caliber Mind. You don't know anything about Caliber Mind. It's a marketing decision engine. It's like a Ferrari. So if you get a chance to check it out, it is amazing and I'm going to miss it. I'm a little bit like Lance, which is I have a lot of experience with. As a matter of fact, I remember when a marketing tech stack was Eloqua plus Salesforce. That's how long I've been around this. That's my background. And Nadia, I'll hand it back over to you.
Everybody starts with Eloqua because I remember those days and that checkered canvas dashboard where everything was up for grabs. Hi, everyone. My name is Nadia Davis and I run revenue marketing and marketing operations at Payit. Payit is a SaaS company in the GovTech space. We serve all 50 states and residents within those 50 states, and also including Canada. My affiliation with Caliber Mind and Doug is that we are clients of Caliber Mind. That tool is one of those tools that changes your life as a revenue marketer or operations leader because whatever you used to spend a lot of time on becomes very intuitive and automatic. Happy to be here.
Excellent. As far as the webinar itself today, for attendees, whenever you want to ask a question, ask it in the chat, and we'll get to those throughout our presentation. Feel free to ask away, and we'll have time at the end if we don't hit them live. The agenda as we go forward are, we basically done the introductions. We'll have the presentation and discussion for today. Talk about key takeaways, questions, and polls along the way, and questions and answers at the end as well. To start us off, Doug will kick us off here.
So this is really my passion for the last 4 or 5 months, and that is how do you maintain really good funnel diagnostics in an era of hyper accelerated change for marketing and specifically MarTech. I think that to call that out now, given how much change is happening in the funnel and marketing in the last 5 or 10 years, would give you sort of an idea just how different I think things are and will become. And the title of the webinar is about diagnostics in the face of large language models and how they're going to impact the funnel. And the answer there is we don't know yet, but we do know that it's very disruptive. And sort of the best guess, and I'll be curious to hear what Nadia has to say in this area, I think she's more expert than I am ultimately, is that a lot of that organic and direct traffic that shows up strongly in your funnel is going to start migrating over and be less trackable when it starts getting originated from large language models. The exception there is Perplexity. I think everybody understands that it's close to sort of a Google search and as close to that experience for most folks. And you're still getting some credit or understanding when that model hits your website, but otherwise sort of a black box. So which brings us back to today's topic, which is diagnostics for the traditional funnel. And I will tell you, I speak a lot, Nadia does too. And these are my key takeaways for folks as they're seeing disruption in their funnel. I'm going to talk about 3 things. One is, what are the macro factors we have to think about? The second thing is the mix. Some of this will feel really familiar. Other cases, it won't. I think ICP mix will be new for some folks. Then I'm going to give you a technique I use for taking a limited period of time and projecting it out to understand whether you've got a big problem or a small problem in your funnel. So the first thing I'm going to mention are macro factors. One is incredibly hard to measure, but something you should be thinking about as you look at your funnel. That's the externality of the economy. And I'll give 2 examples of parts of the economy that currently are actually doing really poorly right now. One is SaaS. SaaS is not doing well. It's under tremendous pressure. And if you get down to the niche within SaaS, which is MarTech, you're seeing even more pressure. Those funnels are looking very different than you're expecting them to, largely because of cost of capital. The other is, I'll give you another example, and I'm not going to hit every industry that's under stress and duress right now, but pharma, biopharma, there's a cost of capital factor there as well. So we're just seeing some really weird dynamics there. So that's piece number one. Consider that when you're thinking about funnel performance. And we're 2 years in, at least in SaaS, to the recession. So in some ways we can say, okay, we've normalized the data over a long enough period of time that I can say there's external factors, but they are sort of already built into the model. There are other industries, however, that are just hitting a really recessionary period. So always think about that. The second is market maturity, and this is much more measurable and understandable. And so think about the Jeffrey Moore market adoption curve. Every category has to go through that curve. Now, whether it makes it to sort of the maturity stage or the late majority stage, not all categories make it there. But it's really easy to measure. And speaking of large language models, the thing I would highly recommend is to make sure if you're looking at your inbound funnel, you're in a place where inbound funnel makes sense, meaning you probably have crossed the chasm or are crossing the chasm. That doesn't mean you can't set up an inbound funnel before that. But really, if you think about what that market adoption curve means, it means that, let's say that you're in that early adopter or innovator area, you're talking about 3 to 8% of the market that's likely to buy from you. That's an outbound motion. You may be getting inbound, but it's going to be a really variable funnel. You're not going to feel a lot of consistency in the funnel. So those are really two ways to sort of think about your macro factors. I mentioned before, it's pretty easy to understand whether or not you've crossed the chasm or where you are. Perplexity, Claude, ChatGPT, build a prompt. And if you need help with this prompt, please reach out to me. I'll happily share mine. They're actually published on Claude. There are prompts that you can deliver that will scrape your site, scrape your competitor sites, and then effectively use Jeffrey Moore's model to come back and tell you what the heuristics are. In other words, the indicators of whether you're crossing the chasm or have not. And it's a good cheat sheet for you as a MOPs person or as a DG person, because I don't need you to roll this up to the investors or the board. I just need you to have this in front of you to understand, hey, this might be a part of why my funnel's a little bit wonky, because it should be more outbound, and inbound's going to be a little more variable until a large percentage of the market is aware and sort of looking for you online. So those are macro factors. And yes, Gabriella, I will happily provide that link to folks. We'll do it afterwards. And if we have time, I'll share it in the chat here. So that's sort of the big fuzzy one. Let's get away from the big fuzzies, right? But those are things we have to consider. The next one is channel mix. I think we all get this, but I have to mention it, right? The reason I'm mentioning channel mix is, let's sort of start with the hierarchy. A referral lead is going to convert at a much higher rate than a direct search lead, which is going to convert at a higher rate than organic, which is going to convert at a higher rate than a PPC, and so on, right? So maybe that order is a little bit different for you. I just gave you the B2B SaaS order and hierarchy of conversions. If you're seeing a lot of variability in your funnel, look at your channel mix over time. If you're seeing a decline, this happened to CaliberMind. How do you remember the EAT update in the fall of 23 or the LinkedIn Algo update, June of 2024? The big platforms love to surprise us, and they will create some variability in what you're seeing. So the EAT update dramatically dropped traffic for a lot of SEO, a lot of SEO traffic, a lot of B2B sites. It happened overnight, but it took a little bit of time for it to have an impact. Keep your eye on that channel mix. If you're seeing one of those less converting channels become more dominant than others, it could explain a lot about how your conversions are going and why maybe they're not going as well as they want. Now, by the way, this presupposes a negative, that things are going poorly. We also get surges. And instead of going, I did a great job, understand what's going on there. So the inverse is also true. Please take a look when you're seeing big surges, because you want to actually jump on those. Now, I'm going to admit the other piece here, which is ICP mix. And by ICP, I mean ideal customer profile. There are a couple ways to do this, but let me talk about the what, and then I'll talk about the how. So your ICP mix, whether or not you're able to identify your ideal customer or acceptable or unacceptable customer profile, they're showing up in your funnel. If you're seeing more acceptable or unacceptable customer profiles hitting your funnel, irrespective of what channels they're coming through, you're going to see either an improvement or a decline in funnel performance. So I mentioned two ways to go about actually understanding this. The first is, Nadia and I talked about the days of EloQuest, so that tells you how old we are. But your map quite often will actually use engagement data to score. So you can use scoring models to evaluate whether your inbound funnel is getting more high scoring or low scoring folks. That's one way to look at it. You buy a platform like CaliberMind, which scores this for you quickly and easily. And what that allows you to do, therefore, is to just be able to sort of on a daily basis without having to go through a whole sort of scoring and reporting process that's there in front of you. You can see that ICP mix. So finally, so let me just recap those, and then I'm going to go to the reverse funnel. First, look at macro factors, get agreement on what's happening. Where are you in terms of crossing the chasm? Can we get general agreement on what the economic factors are that are sort of suppressing or improving the funnel? Look at ICP mix and channel mix. If you don't have a tool that does ICP mix, you can use scoring as an analog for that. Then channel mix, which I think we all know really well. Okay. My last tip for everybody in terms of funnel diagnostics is something I have been doing for a really long time. I call it the reverse funnel forecast. And this is really helpful when you have a limited amount of data. So let's say that you've got, or a limited amount of data within a time period. And I think we all have had this scenario where it's, say, January or it's February, and we're seeing some really wonky stuff when it comes to the funnel. Take that and forecast it out over a year. Basically, you go, okay, what is my funnel conversion rates? I will go from, let's say, I want to win 100 customers per quarter, and I will run the math up based on my current month, and I forecast that out. Again, depends on the length of your sales cycle. Fast sales cycle, maybe go 90 days out. Long sales cycles, maybe go a year out. What you'll get is a really cool spreadsheet. And if you're anything like me, I love spreadsheets. But you're also going to begin to see this larger data set, exaggerated because it's only 1 month or maybe 1 quarter. What you're going to start seeing is really where you've got those profound choke points. The one I've been seeing show up a lot lately across all of my accounts is the MQL to SQL conversion rates have gone really wacky over time. And quite often that is competitive pressure or it's pricing pressure. And again, this is SaaS, which is my bailiwick. A lot of disruption happening there. I'm able to find that by doing the reverse funnel forecast. So those are my tips for now. I'm going to hand things over. I think I'm off to Nadia next.
Thank you, Doug. I can't agree more. Things have changed. And they always say there are 2 things for certain, which is death and taxes. But if you're in marketing, you have a third one, and that's change. You either deal with it because that will keep coming at you, or you perish, right? You become irrelevant. Let me take us back to the days when the concept of a marketing funnel came about. We're talking about early 2000s. Serious Decisions, an organization that many of you may have heard of, for some of you may have been before you, rolled out their demand waterfall. And it was exactly the funnel that was going through the stages. The assumption was the more leads you get at the top of the funnel, they will go through all of these different stages: awareness, consideration, ready to purchase. I mean, 6, 7 stages, depending on who you ask. But the assumption was the more you feed the top of the funnel, the more you will get at the bottom. It was a very nice linear progression through people learning about your product, learning about your brand, converting and becoming advocates, you being able to upsell, and them spreading the good word about you. This was promoted across essentially the entire marketing universe. All the marketers adopted this, and it became de facto model for demand generation. So we're talking almost 20 years of people being exposed to this, using that across all systems, using that for measurement of results, using that for forecasting. So we kind of bought into this whole thing. And then the things started changing. You realize that inbound promoted the concept of the more you feed the top of the funnel, the more people will reach out to you. HubSpot inbound was a huge motion. We have all systems of record that are set up centered around leads and people. We got systems of engagement, all of your maps, centered around leads. We have board members trained, convinced, and converted to know that more leads in means more output in revenue, right? You have ICs across multiple businesses, regardless of the industry, having their goals tied in marketing to these conversion metrics, right? And the conversion metrics themselves became OKRs. We're very much bought in across the entire business ecosystem into the concept of the funnel. Now, I want to see where you guys are. If we want to do our first poll question, I would love to get your feedback on how you currently track your marketing funnel, if it's a thing for you, if that's something your specific organization pays attention to. I'd be curious to know, and I'll go ahead and pick my answer too. But as we go through the poll, if you're done, there's an exercise that I got for you. I want you to go and Google marketing funnel is dead. There's been a lot of drama on LinkedIn, all over the place. SEO is dead. MQL is dead. This is so flaring. I love this phrase. When I talk to people, this is the four-leaf clover, the conversation piece where everything is dead, right? Funnel is dead, one of those things. And of course, Fortune has an article written on that, how it's so irrelevant. Then Forbes had an article in their business section on this. So, I'm curious to know if this is truly so. And Lance, if we get the results of the poll, let me know what those are. If the funnel is truly dead for people or if they're still measuring it, and then we will continue the conversation from there.
Yep. So far, 78% are basing it on the CRM lead lifecycle stages, lead MQL to opportunity. And 22% based it on the CRM account lifecycle, the target account model from MQA to op. And then 33% are basing it on the engagement traffic sources.
Okay, so we got an even spread, right? From what I'm hearing, people got different ways of how they track or measure the funnel. But I love this because I think this ties nicely into the next part of how I wanted to approach this conversation. On the slide here, we're looking at two funnels, and they serve a completely different objective as to why you would use it and what you can get with each specific funnel. The object-based funnel, from your MQL to your SQL, then create an opportunity. It's a very nice, very clean, easily managed linear progression that any human mind can wrap their mind around. It's nice for forecasting. It's a simple linear math of conversions. You can figure out your revenue and sell the concept to your leaders. And I guess the 78% that said that based on CRM lead life cycle stages, their funnel is built, essentially refer to this. Why is it so? Because your system is set up that way, because you're working in your CRM, that's the record of truth. And for you to take that and rebuild it to something else, it's an extremely difficult exercise, even if you are the whiz of the Salesforce world. Amazing with writing flows. And I've worked with a ton of people who are just beyond talented writing flows, and we rebuild things. But the bigger the business you're in, the more difficult it is to roll this out, get the buy-in, and do all the change management. Everybody understands it. Everybody knows that MQL, and this has been 20 years in the making from the serious decision times of the early 2000s, MQL means we brought something to marketing. To sales. Marketing brought something to sales, and it's easily measurable. And then this is lead to opportunity funnel, right? Then we go into the early 2010s. The ABM motion came about. Terminus became a thing. By the way, I'm based in Atlanta, so the Terminus Building 1 and Terminus Building 2 are still named after Terminus, even though Terminus is no longer Terminus. Now they're Demand Science. And then you had Demand-Based, Sixth Sense, and Triblio, and they had their version of the funnel. That funnel was different. It was very much account-based funnel. And they were looking at the digital sources that they were tracking, and they were put in different accounts in different stages of the funnels. So as a marketer, now you have the dichotomy. You have your object-based funnel in CRM on the left-hand side of the slide, and then you have the ABM platform funnel, and those two did not really talk to each other. So you had to always explain to your business how what this expensive ABM platform is showing is really tied to the way we track and forecast revenue in our CRM. It was a difficult conversation. Many people failed. Many people said, this just doesn't work. Let's go back to what we know to be tried and true. This is the default. People always default to what they know to be tried and true. However, the ABM motion did not die out because people still understood that we are selling into accounts. If you're in the B2B world, if you are not selling simple widgets or the kind of individual user type staple products, you still have the buying group where you have to influence more than one person. In a lot of cases, your lead comes in and maybe it's not even the right type of the lead. Maybe it's not even the right type of account. Why would you waste time on that? Or maybe you'll take 10 other people to say yes before this lead even pans out. So kind of the concept of account-based marketing people understood, but they just couldn't operationalize it. And now We have the studies that came out from Sixth Sense. I believe this was just earlier this year, or maybe at the end of last year, where they said 80% of purchasing happens in the dark funnel, meaning you cannot track it. It's just this mystical place. And one of the first 3 companies that are considered early on make it to the last evaluation stage of that pre-purchase cycle, right? So the idea was the sooner you get to people that are doing their research within the dark funnel, which is 80% of the buyer's journey, the higher the chances are that you will be one of the 3 that will make it to the short list. You will be the finalist. So you have the 1 in 3 chance of winning the deal, right? And the problem with the dark funnel is that you want to influence it. You want to have an in and figure out what those evaluation criteria are. The ABM platforms will tell you it's your SEO, it's like all of those things that we have known and tried before, right? But there are also so many unknowns in terms of where this evaluation happens. These days, this evaluation, like Doug was saying, could be happening within conversations within ChatGPT or in communities on Slack in different channels, or it could be happening in, review platforms could be some of those, or during the chat conversations on different websites. You're just getting that information, but it doesn't get referred in any meaningful way. The question still becomes, you have all of this stuff happening, and you used to have one search engine that you figured out, which was Google in most cases. Now you have essentially 5 or 6, or this will keep growing, search engines where people are engaging in these discovery conversations that is completely not trackable, right? I keep thinking there was this movie about the little gremlins, and you sprinkle water on those gremlins and they just grow. And out of one gremlin, you get 5 or 6 or 10, and they get mean and scary. This was my first scary movie that I saw as a kid. And
that was the 2024 election, Nadia.
This was way before then. This was a lot of gremlins in my childhood. But I feel the same about the world of AI platforms and LLMs that are like exponentially growing by the day. So the question becomes, if we still treat website as the place where we want all of the people to come and learn more about us, and all these referring sources are just exponentially multiplying, we cannot track a lot of them. And GA4 has become 50% black box after the 2023 update, because now they said, just deal with it. 50% of your traffic, you will not be able to identify who they are because they opted out and were respectful of their privacy choices. So you get trends, you don't get the actuals. It was a very uncomfortable place as I was moving GA3 to GA4. These known visitors on the right-hand side of the funnel are becoming less and less and less. And of course, your tech stack is supporting you in helping you identify who those are, but you're also operationalizing it. That's why you need email so that, those people become known. But in many accounts, those people will remain unknown because, again, they come from different places that cannot be identified. So ultimately, if you are thinking about the object-based funnel, you realize you're missing out on the full picture of engagement. You don't know the unknown people doing research because in your CRM, it's only the ones who you have first name, last name, email address for. There's a record for them. Hopefully your map cookied them, and now you can see all of their engagement and you're tracking their website visits, right? It's a part of the picture. If you go with a funnel that was more tofu, mofu, bofu, which is the HubSpot days, right? That assume they'll fill in your emotion. If people are consuming this type of content, this is early stages, they're learning about you. That's your branding. Then we will drop people into webinars and white papers. If they're interested in that, that's amazing. Now they're middle of the funnel. They're more likely to convert, right? Some people track them QOs that way. Who downloaded my white paper? I put a form in front of them, must be interested. And then we had the BOFU. Those are the ones that maybe took some higher value steps, maybe attended a webinar or maybe started a conversation. But even in that funnel, we assume that everybody takes that linear journey through how they discover brands. And I remember seeing this joke about, it was a little sketch. And it said, when a man goes to a mall, his journey is like this. It had 1 dot here, 1 dot here, and they were connected. A guy goes to a mall, he goes exactly to the store that he needs, he buys something, he exits out. I said, a woman goes to the mall and that journey was insane because she's all over the place. She's looking at everything. She's checking out all the sales, right? Like this is what we're dealing with the omnichannel and all of the LLMs that are referring people to you, that are mentioning your brand without you knowing it, then you have no way of measuring it. It essentially defies that linear motion of mofu or tofu, mofu, bofu, right? So that funnel has to be retired. So notice we already retired 3 funnels. We said the object-based funnel is incomplete. It's there. You can measure certain things, but it's incomplete. The ABM funnel is also incomplete because it does not consider all the things that are not picked up by your ABM, website tracker-based platform. We have retired the tofu, mofu, bofu funnel. So what remains? What do you have to work with to figure out how good the marketing is doing their job, nurturing people, telling people about the ways to solve their problem that they're researching? So we get to this notion of engagement funnel. And there are many ways how you can do an engagement funnel and track it across the known visitors and the unknown visitors. But you have to have a tech stack that is really fine-tuned to kind of track both. So let's take the simplistic model, right? You get your stages in your CRM where you're scoring people, you're putting people into their lead lifecycle statuses, right? Then you roll it up to account level and maybe add something for tracking on the account level from your ABM platform that gets fed into your CRM. You're merging the two together. Now you have a funnel of accounts going through stages, which is more complete than what you had in the ABM platform, because now you're adding all of the offline conversions from Salesforce, scoring people, rolling them up to account level, adding the score from that platform, and kind of doing still the scoring progression, but in a more complex way. But you still have silos because you're still challenged in how do I bring the data that comes from the large language models and all the referrals that I cannot append. And this is where you get to this notion that I think is the most accurate these days, regardless of where it's coming from. That's the engagement intensity. So if you rethink the funnel and say, it doesn't really matter to me what type of content these people are looking at, whether they're looking at white papers, which we thought in the past were a very advanced buyer journey kind of stage, whether they're looking at branding, whether they're asking in some community, hey, what do you know about such and such? The traffic comes to the website because somebody dropped the link and you cannot identify it. But you can see the engagement intensity, say, within the account of how many hits came from that account. And then your intensity is essentially prorated through different stages, where least engaged the up here, most engaged the down there. So we're talking about volumes. And Doug, I would be interested to know your opinion on this. I think ultimately that intensity funnel, intensity of engagement, is what we have to work with, because that's the only way to avoid the data silos. The quality of data is of utmost importance. Your ability to bring different types of data and stitch them together is of utmost importance. Even though the CDP category exploded in the last, a year or so, I think there are like 50 players in the CDP category, but CDP has become the prerequisite of anything that you do on the marketing front, especially in revenue operations or marketing operations, that allows you to bring all of those different touch points, data points, into one journey. We're traveling along this variable of constant change. Maybe something will change. The visibility that we get into these large language models will change. But now, like, even if you follow Rand Fishkin, who was the amazing guy, if you're not following him, you should. He's on LinkedIn. He was the founder of Moz. Before, you used to monetize traffic. The more people you can spend your, money on and bring to your site, the more people will convert. Well, these days, you're spending the money, but you're not seeing the output. It's almost like you're forced into looking at some kind of record of truth, the center of the solar system of what is engaging this account. It's no longer a person, it's account, right? If you're targeting accounts, if you're in a B2B world, how are those accounts progressing at the level of intensity? That's my take on the evolution of the funnel. If this sounds good, we'll move on to...
let's hand the thing. Just a couple things as we get to Lance. I said this in the chat. Nadia, spot on. The funnel is annoying. It's a legacy. It works if your ACV is below 10K. If you have a buying committee more than 3, it's not great. And that's not to say that the content we're sharing with you today is not useful from a diagnostic standpoint. It still is, but please recognize that what Nadia is saying is the next generation is going to be engagement based and it's going to be scoring based and it's not going to be linear. But her point's a really good one, which is the investors expect us to report on a funnel basis. So we have to live in these two worlds where we know things are nonlinear, but at the same time, we've got to begin building these revenue engagement models. So I think Nadia's spot on. Over to you, Lance. Let's hear about the precious.
Thank you. We'll launch our next poll question as well, which is how important to you is your ability to have insight and track your marketing funnel stages? As you're answering that question, we'll get into what all this means for us in the short term and as we're planning for everything that Doug and Nadia just talked about. One of the outcomes that comes out of people switching how they research when they're in that 80% stage, researching before you know about them, it used to be, and is more so now, that people would come to the website eventually when they get that information. Now, a lot of that traffic is going towards this generative AI space. And so what that means is the information that you are able to get is going to be decreasing over the next couple of years. And so that makes that data, when you do get it, that much more valuable, hence it's precious. And because of that, it makes it even more important that you really nail down the structure for how you are tracking everything. And it's basically to nail the basics. That includes getting the key information that your executive team really wants to get. And it's not necessarily the same information that's helpful for you. The main things they're looking for are what revenue are we getting and what are the cost efficiencies we're getting as we get to that. The things you want to know is like, what are the web traffics? What are the ways that people came to that? You'll still want to know and narrow down, but that may not be as much as what you're asked about on the executive side. And nailing that structure down, it's key in how you set up the campaign structure within your CRM. In our case, specifically in Salesforce, you're kind of hamstrung by the abilities within Salesforce itself. A lot of times companies have tried to use parent-child relationships when setting up that campaign structure. It becomes much more efficient to make that more linear and put it directly on one object. Examples there are instead of organizing it so you have a parent account of these are all the webinars that came in or this web traffic or ad campaigns, make that singular and have more pick list values for the other bits of information. However you organize it, you still have it all in one spot. The QR code you see on the screen is to a white paper that Caliber Mind put together on how they recommend doing it, which is pretty helpful as well. The other thing to make sure of is to make sure your data is clean. As always, make sure your information is up to date as possible on the latest demographics on the company, eliminating duplicates and everything like that. And you're right. I should have used the Gollum voice, Doug. That was
sorry, Lance. That was a fail.
Yeah. That was a missed opportunity for sure.
No, Lance, you said something interesting, and that's make sure your data is clean. And I think it's one of those really stretchy concepts that means a different thing to every single organization, right? It's like my husband always jokes, the reason that when people go into the military, they have to go through the boot camp. It's because military needs everybody to have the same understanding of every single concept so that the baseline is the same for everyone, right? However, when you ask your kids, hey, can you clean your room? You will have all sorts of results that are different because everyone's understanding of what clean means in this particular case without the baseline is different, right? And I feel like in a lot of cases within organizations, and I've been part of those organizations where you join and you get this, our data in Salesforce, wiki clean. This is a quote. Somebody told me that. And then I go in there and I realize, whoa, what you said is clean to you, to me is just siloed, partial, fractured. It's just not there. You're saying it's clean because nobody's touching it. It's because you're not actively managing it, right? So I think that's a really valid comment, but it becomes that much harder to do when you have that data coming at you from all of these unknown sources that we were talking about that you're trying to append to a campaign. But remember, the CRM is a relational database. You have to have a name of a person before you can tie them to something else. And opportunities are tied to accounts, and that's where the dollars are assigned, right? So the question becomes, how do you structure that data? What is there to unify that data in a format that all of your systems can truly append and attribute? And that's where the cleanliness conversation comes in. And I think people on this webinar probably will appreciate that because it's like daily, mundane routine for a lot of you. But it's really hard to translate at the leadership level because for some people, it's a non-starter. Like, what do you mean the data is clean? It's data. What's there to think about, right? They don't touch that. However, all these concepts of either building a funnel or tracking everything that comes from ChatGPTs and Claudes and Perplexities of the world, whether you can attribute or not, very much roots in this concept of, can you make that data work in a structure that you have? And if you can, you get clean data. And you shouldn't even be moving anywhere till you get your house in order. Then you can start answering questions that people have. Curious if you have any comments on this.
Yeah, just having the structure in place, even if it's not clean on day one, just the ability to see how it's changing over time. Are my conversion rates from NQL to SAL to SQL going up or down? What's happening to my current customers? Are we able to track to that level, going beyond opportunities to see, are we getting the right information to people we're already working with to make sure that we're continuing to grow those accounts and keep them happy? You need to build those systems in order to get that information. I think that's why everybody's here.
Yeah, the simple heuristic for me is always, does the executive team trust the data? And if they don't, it's time to start working on cleaning up. I agree with Nadia. The standards for clean are variable. To simplify it, does your executive team trust the data you're presenting to them? If not, you've got a challenge. You need to address it right away.
Yeah. And a lot of that comes in as well to framing the right conversation. Because a lot of times, if people are looking at attribution, they're trying to look at just one piece to say, this opportunity came from this one touch point, whereas it's probably dozens, sometimes even hundreds that came up to that point. So having the conversation of how that all came into play really frames that conversation you're having with them.
And I think that takes us to the hot takes, no pun intended. And I think we already started with like the hot takeaways. I don't know, Doug, if you have anything specific that you kind of observed.
It's not hot. It's the thing I've been on really for the last 2 years. And you've already nailed one of my two things that I will say if you give me 2 minutes, which is data hygiene. So I won't go there. But the other piece, and I'm so glad Nadia brought this up, is if you do not have engagement data, if you do not have tools that allow you to track engagement on a person level, on an account level over time and score that, you really need to close that gap. And it all comes back to Nadia's really good points about the origination of the linear funnel and how we've been tied to it over time. And that's not the way buyers buy. To recognize buyer journeys appropriately is to be able to have engagement data. And I see so many organizations that just haven't taken the plunge. If you have an ROI question, go to the Caliber Mind website, talk to one of our amazing sellers. They'll help you understand why it's so important. If you are using a linear funnel only and you're missing sort of that circuitous buyer journey using engagement data, you're going to have a very sort of narrow slice on a world that is never quite that linear.
And I think that is so true. And I think as marketers, as operations people, we tend to gravitate to areas that are easy to track, ingest, bring in, work with, which is the digital world. There are platforms out there, there are APIs that allow you to bring in the data stamps, and it neatly fits into all of your timelines, all of your opportunity created. Let's look back at, the timing of when something happened. The world is getting very muddy, very gray traffic, like the world of large language models. And, what can you deduce from there? But if you focus your attention on just that, you will completely miss out on the other side of what marketing is doing and what you can attribute and what really moves the needle. And it's all of the offline stuff. I think we're getting to the point where people are starting to recognize that lack of human element when it comes to what AI output gives us, especially with generative AI. I was pitching something to someone on LinkedIn. I did the quick prompt and ChatGPT gave me the whole rundown. This is how you do it. I'm like, great. That's exactly what I want to say. My prompt, my idea, my kind of suggestions. It just sandwich it nicely. The person got it that I was pitching to, and he goes, I'm also a ChatGPT user. I can recognize that. I'm like, shoot, I haven't removed all of the emojis. We're getting to the point where we're starting to recognize that lack of the high value, very human kind of validated output sometimes. And we're gravitating back to these offline channels for engagement, for meaningful connections. We're talking in-person events. We're talking, dinners. We're talking phone conversations. And what is all of that? That's like all that stuff that gets logged into campaigns. That's what Lance was talking about, right? That's your campaign structure. This is how do you track all of that? Do you have a mechanism that ingests what's happening in the digital world that you can track very easily and what is happening in an offline world? Can you bring it all together? Can you model it? And then can you tie that to revenue? Now that's the $1,000,000 question. And that's what most companies cannot solve for. Because how easy it is to ask a salesperson and say, hey, where did this opportunity come from? And like, oh, I talked to them at the event. First touch, campaign or whatever, the opportunity sourced from here. But what if all the other things that happened were not tracked properly or went into the black hole of data collection or maybe happened in the digital world? You're missing that connection point. So to me, the hot take between the explosion of untrackable digital channels and the fact that things are still happening offline, being able to bring that together, to me, that's the hottest take that people should be thinking about. Because if you're tracking only one or the other, you're truly missing the full picture. I don't know if you guys have any comments on that. If not, we can maybe look at some questions. I see chat exploding.
I'm curious as we wait for Lance to let us know what the next question is. We open things up with this vector of large language models and the transition. I'm curious, do folks have an opinion on what the next version of our websites will be to take advantage of the large language models?
We have a question from Jenny. And she says, can you talk more about how you know what's happening in the offline world?
This is to your point on the dark funnel, Nadia.
Well, I actually have a story on that. I was in a meeting. It was end of the year meeting last year, and we had the sales team, the sales leadership and marketing planning the next year. And this is like totally a RevOps, SmartOps conversation. So we're talking events. We're in a government technology world. You can imagine we kiss babies and shake hands, and that's how a lot of deals happen, right? But the in-person factor is super important. So our sales team goes to like 90 events to give you the idea of the offline stuff, right? How do you know? And I have spent hours talking to our sales team about bringing in leads and logging them properly and doing all of the right data entry so that marketing has those points and names in the CRM. And I understand that the world of sellers is super busy. Like we don't have insights into everything. They're doing 1,000 things every day. And the sales leader looks at me and goes, so you expect me to have people log in leads from 84 events that they're going to? I was like, yeah. He goes, isn't there some kind of software out there that will know who they had a conversation with at dinner? And I'm thinking, the ops mind in me is thinking, okay, what are you talking about? Like Siri listening to someone on their cell phone automatically and then matching it to Zoom info and some, through an AI agent and bringing the back. It just says like, I'm trying to reverse engineer that. But in his mind, it should be super simple in 2025. So the point being, to answer your question, we don't know what's happening in the offline world until someone, and sometimes it's manual, brings this data point into your CRM, right? And if that point is not there, how do you know who had that conversation with someone else at an event, at a community meeting, at whichever place you want to be? But that kind of takes me back to that Rand Fishkin point where he said, gone are the days of you being able to track every single touch point and figure out what's going on with traffic. You have to look at these niched communities where engagement is taking place and being able to capitalize off of what's happening there. How do you bring it out? It's a data entry and data stewardship conversation, people understanding what that campaign structure should be. How do I enter people into Salesforce, and actually taking the time to enter people either in a Google spreadsheet, and then you will give it to your MOPs people, or into the CRM itself. I hope that answered the question.
I have a teenager, and I don't know if you've ever tried to experience life with a teenager, but this is their experience, right? They're sort of behind their phones. And I would say the majority of adults are in that place. So what I would say about offline is that it is shrinking, unfortunately. And so much of what we're doing is through a device, right? I think the piece I want to be thinking about are what are the tactics to close the dark funnel, the dark data part. And I think there are two things I would strongly recommend there. They are not perfect, but intent-based data models can be really helpful to suss out topics and early stages of buyer journeys. Put yourself in a spot where your sellers are deeply connected with their market via LinkedIn, and combine the two things. So you've got intent data, engagement data, and if your sellers are social selling, it's a little bit like navigating the Atlantic without a compass, but you're still able to see the sun and other things to navigate, and it at least starts closing down some of those gaps in the dark funnel. By the way, I don't think the dark funnel really exists. I think Chris Walker did a great job of marketing himself, but if you're online, we can track you. We can find you. So dark funnel doesn't exist. It's just more difficult to measure at the end of the day.
I don't think the Sixth Sense research or team will be happy to hear that, but I think you're absolutely right. It's just how sophisticated are you bringing all of that in, having all the technology in place, reverse identifying IPs to come to your site, figuring out what other data points are there. I think sometimes it's a race to the bottom on your tech stack collection. The more you have, the more maintenance is a problem. Spend is high. So how much is too much or how little is enough? But that's the dark funnel conversation.
Lance, you're going to do the voice for us?
I can't do it as well. Oh.
You made our hearts sing, Nadia and I, by having that on there. We're both big fans of Lord of the Rings, so we were deeply disappointed in your lack of Gollum imitation. So next time.
Yeah, for sure. I'll work on it. It looks like if we're out of questions, we appreciate everybody's time today. The presentation and slides will be available as a link in a couple of weeks. Those will be sent out as well. Anything else you'd like to add, Doug and Nadia?
I did share the prompt in the chat. Lance will share it with you so the RevOps community can share the prompt. It is a Claude prompt, but it can be redeployed. Perplexity is the other place I would use that prompt. This is, again, back to how do I have a simple way of measuring market maturity? Simple, but at least it's a start.
Well, thank you, Doug. Thank you, Nadia. And thank you for everybody for attending. I hope you have a great day.